Good morning. My name is Aisha Spradley, Professional Learning and Instruction Coordinator for PSAYDN, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'd like to welcome each of you to today's webinar entitled Amplifying Afterschool Voices, Advocacy Strategies. To kick things off, we're going to start with an icebreaker question. It's pretty simple, but it'll help get us in the right mind frame for what Ron will present. What is one word that comes to mind when you think about advocacy? You can either unmute yourself and share, or you can put it in the chat. Representing, thank you, Mary. Collective voice, we love that. Denise said either expressing your voice or having a voice for others. Perfect. Lifting the voices, amplifying. Thank you, Anne. All right. So I think we hit on educating. Thank you so much, Chantrell. Storytelling is definitely a key part of it. I think these are a lot of the things that Ron's going to touch on today. Promoting the best qualities and importance of after school. Thank you, Amy. Those are perfect. Your responses show how personal and creating opportunities. Thank you, Cynthia. I didn't want to miss that one. Your responses show how personal and powerful advocacy can be and why it's important. And today we'll explore how to channel all of that into action. It's now my pleasure to welcome today's presenter, Ron Cowell, founder and senior fellow of the Education Policy and Leadership Center. We are so grateful to have him with us today, and I'll hand it over to you now, Ron.
Okay, thanks very much. I am going to share my slides, and good morning. I do this for Contrail and his colleagues once or twice a year. I am always happy to do it. Recognize a couple of the names on here. Anne, as opponents, I haven't seen you for a while. You were one of our fellows a few years ago. And I think you were one of the ambassadors sometime in the past. I lose track of some of these years, but it's good to be with everybody. I understand this is a collection of STEM ambassadors, after-school ambassadors, and other ambassadors who take seriously this business of advocacy. So I'm happy to do it. I do recognize that you all start in very different places. Some of you are seasoned veterans with this advocacy work. And for others, it may be relatively new. Some of you have been leaders in this business, and others are maybe thinking through how do you motivate and support your colleagues, whether it's in the workplace or your family or in the community, to have them engage in more effective advocacy. So forgive me if in some cases I'm telling you stuff that just comes naturally to you. Bear with me, but again, I recognize that you do come from many different places. This is really getting ready for your policymaker visits, whether it is the day in Harrisburg, that'll be coming up in a few weeks, or very importantly, doing it locally all year round, or maybe just on your own, you make an occasional visit to Harrisburg or even Washington. Most of the focus that I have this morning is in the state government Harrisburg context, but the larger principles apply whether you're lobbying Harrisburg, Washington, D.C., or sometimes just in your local community with a school board or your municipal or county government. There are a few slides on here that I'm just going to highlight very quickly because it's not a part of the advocacy conversation I want to have. But often I do a 2-hour presentation. The first hour of it is about this point of how an idea becomes a law. And so it's a bit about the process. And I've got a few slides on here, and I'll make all these slides available to folks through Contrail and his colleagues there. But just a couple things I want to highlight. Just a reminder, in Pennsylvania, and this varies from state to state to state, but in Pennsylvania, we have 2-year sessions. The legislature is almost continuously in session. It starts technically on December 1 of a even-numbered election year. They get sworn in January, though, and it continues until November 30th of the following year. So when stuff gets introduced, and as I note on here, there are more than 5,000 bills that get introduced every 2-year session. whenever it gets introduced, whether it's on the first day or the last day, it maintains its bill number until the end of the session. And if it has not been enacted into law, then it disappears. You got to start over. So few of these 5,000 bills become law, but that's just a reminder that the process very intentionally is not easy. Some of you have heard me say before, you got to remember that this is a process that was designed by the folks who had just rebelled against the King of England. And they didn't like the idea of making it too easy for somebody to impose laws on them. So again, the process begins though when a bill is introduced. It's assigned a House or Senate bill number. It's assigned to a committee, but it keeps that bill number until the end of the session. The committees and the process is mostly determined by the leadership of each House or each chamber, the House and Senate, and it's governed by chamber rules. Now, there are some constitutional requirements as well, but the establishment of any committees at all, that's a decision made by each chamber, and it can change every 2 years. The process is very much determined by chamber rules. The other thing that's highlighted in red there is the fiscal note issue. That has not always been a requirement. It's an old requirement now, probably about 30 years old, but it is intended to help inform the lawmakers and the public about what are the fiscal consequences of a bill or of an amendment. And so sometimes that is easily done. You know, it's a quick calculation. Sometimes it's a bit of a guessing process on the part of the staff that has to prepare that fiscal note. But the rules now require fiscal notes, and that's an important tool for everybody who's trying to evaluate the effects of, and certainly the cost of any particular piece of legislation or amendments to it. Just a reminder that here in Pennsylvania, and this is true at the federal level too, although the process to get to this is a little different, but a bill has to pass both the House and Senate in exactly the same form. Language, punctuation, everything, nothing can be different, one bill to the other. So the fact is sometimes you're confronted with a situation where everybody says they voted for it. All the House members voted for it. All the Senate members voted for it. They voted for the big idea, you know, maybe the political message. But if they didn't vote for exactly the same bill, language, punctuation, everything, nothing happens. So if two different versions pass, the House and Senate, then they need to reconcile any differences, and both chambers need to approve the reconciliation before it can go to the governor for the governor's consideration. This fourth slide is about the influence of legislative leaders. I just remind folks that one of the assignments of leaders in the legislature, frankly, and this is a political assignment, avoid tough votes for their members. Don't have their members cast a tough vote, a politically unpopular vote, if nothing is going to happen with a piece of legislation. And the other thing to keep in mind is that there may be widespread support for an idea or for a bill, but powerful leaders who exercise tremendous influence, or I'll say control over the process, can block voting on an issue, even though it looks like there's majority support in the chamber or even in both chambers. Just a few lessons learned. Ideas take a long time to become law, usually. Sometimes things can happen almost overnight, but usually things take a long time. I may have time to tell the story a little bit later on about the work I did on early intervention for infants and preschoolers and their families. That became Act 212 of 1990. It began with work that started in 1983. It took 7 years for that idea to become law. Often ideas evolve. You know, what is first proposed or even first enacted gets changed along the way, or gets changed after it's been enacted. It gets amended in subsequent years. So the stuff that involves change. Most of us are we're ambitious. We want to be aggressive about change. We'd like to see it happen overnight. The reality in Harrisburg is that most change, when it happens incrementally. It can be very significant, but you don't get everything you wanted in the first bite. And then getting to our advocacy conversation at last bullet, understand that there are many intervention opportunities available to each of us, and often timing is important. So just a quick reminder about the state budget making process. We're in the middle of that process now. For those of you who are going to visit Harrisburg, the Capitol will be crawling with people who were there to advocate for one issue or another, because the budget deadline is June 30th constitutionally, and stuff often happens, typically happens as part of a big package that comes together during the last days of May and the days of June as you lead up to that constitutional deadline for the budget to get done. And that last bullet, just to not confuse anybody, non-preferred legislation would involve typically things like the University of Pittsburgh or Penn State, typically some of our higher education institutions, not the state system. These typically are private or state-related institutions. And in that case, they require separate legislation outside of the budget, and they require that separate legislation or non-preferred legislation to get 2/3 approval in both the House and Senate. We're not going to have time to get into all of this. This is part of another conversation, but it's important to understand the regulation making process. That's typically done around education issues by the State Board of Education. But keep in mind, as you advocate, as you lobby, that sometimes there are important education-related issues, regulations that are being considered by other agencies. And the one that I typically use as an example, and again, some of you have heard me say this in other leadership programs, a good example, a bunch of years ago, the Department of Agriculture had a proposed regulation, and it had the attention of school boards and particularly the PTA, teacher unions, superintendents, principals. They were all concerned about this regulation coming out of the Department of Agriculture. Well, it was important to them because it dealt with the use of pesticides in school buildings. So most of the regulations about education come out of the state board, but some of them may come from other agencies. And again, I'm going to give you a couple of referrals here where you can get more information about the regulation making process. Here are the links. And again, you can, I'll make sure you have these slides and you have these links, but good information about how a bill becomes law, the statutory process, and the regulation process, how an idea gets to the State Board of Education, moves through the regulation making process, ultimately has to be reviewed and approved by the Independent Regulatory Review Commission, and then it can take effect. But again, all of those procedures are explained in those two links. And it's the kind of stuff that you might even find useful to copy and share with colleagues at some point. So many opportunities to engage in public advocacy, though. Requirements are often in law. For instance, things have got to happen in the sunshine. There's a couple exceptions dealing with real estate or some personnel issues, but most of the time, public action, or let me say action by the policymakers, needs to be done in public. There are requirements for public notice. There are requirements for several readings. I already talked about the regulatory review process. Keep in mind the making of a state budget. This budget that the legislature is considering now, that process began last August when the various departments, including the Department of Education, began to take their ideas, formulate their ideas that they would take to the governor. Then the governor ultimately presented those as his budget proposal back in February. Same thing with school districts. Now they're required to begin a process sometime in December, January, for a process that in most districts, there's a couple of exceptions, only 2 or 3 out of our 500, but in most cases, that process culminates by the end of June. But very importantly, if you're going to be an effective advocate, you have an obligation to pay attention. Things can happen. Sometimes they are well reported. One of the challenges anymore is that there is less coverage of what's going on in Harrisburg by traditional media than used to be the case. There used to be a press room filled with reporters who focused on state government. They were in the Capitol day after day after day. There's far less of that now. There's much more independent reporting. We're much more reliant on social media. But whatever tools that you use to keep informed, you got an obligation to pay attention if you're going to be effective at this advocacy work. So how to make a difference, effective advocacy. I've been around this policy stuff now for more than 50 years, particularly as I've headed up EPLC for about 25 of those years recently. I spent a lot of time trying to promote understanding about these 3 bullets. Understand the relevancy of public policy. We don't have time to do it today, but if you stop and think and if we had a conversation, the fact that those of you who are education professionals, in most cases, that's a matter of public policy, whether you can keep doing your job, keep your certificate, certification. The fact that kids have got to go to school, that's a matter of public policy. The exceptions to going to school, matter of public policy, homeschooling, etc. Understand the potential of effective public policy. And this can be an important part of your advocacy work as you think through what you're going to be for. For those of you who may have gone through an EPLC leadership program, whether it was just one of these advocacy sessions I do, or if you've been part of our school board candidate workshops, or part of the Education Policy Fellowship Program. We've had more than 700 people go through that program. But you would have heard me say the purpose is stretch your imagination. Stretch your imagination about what you could do if you were the dictator for a day. And that's not desirable, but it's part of the process of stretching your imagination. If you could make things happen using public policy, what would you do? And the potential of effective advocacy. I'll tell a couple of stories about the potential, but every one of us can make a difference. I'll tell one story very quickly. I did mention the work that I did around early intervention. That resulted in Act 212 of 1990. It created rights and services for infants from birth through the beginner age of school and for their families. It's a law that has touched tens of thousands of lives over the last 35 years now. It began with 3 women, 3 educators in Allegheny County taking me to lunch. If you know Pittsburgh, Station Square, they took me to lunch in 1982, actually, and said, would you do something for early intervention? We're losing our federal funding. Those 3 folks made an enormous difference. I had another constituent way back when I was in the legislature, one constituent who called me one day and asked if I would do something for displaced homemakers. Displaced homemakers were typically women, and again, we're talking 35 years ago now, typically women who had been homemakers, raising their family, and their spouse left them, or their spouse died suddenly. In a couple of cases, the displaced homemaker was a male, a couple of cases. In those cases, as I recall, 2 of them anyway, they were Vietnam veterans who lost a spouse, and they were left to raise kids. We introduced legislation. That never became law, the legislation, but it moved the Department of Education to change its policies, and it began to use vocational education money, career tech money now, but vocational education money then, to create some special programs for displaced homemakers, all because one person called their legislator. So there's a lot of potential. The why public advocacy, again, not to read all these, but you're the experts at this. You're the experts. No matter how much experience you have more knowledge about it, more insight about these issues than a typical lawmaker. Lawmakers get elected because they're generalists. They're pretty good generalists, but they're expected to know something about education and solid waste disposal, and at the federal level, national security, and on and on and on, a big list of issues. They really rely, good policy relies on those who have experience and expertise and information and insight and the stories to tell. And many of you probably are members of state associations, and they have lobbyists. They are only as effective as their members are active at the local level and with those days in Harrisburg. Understand the role of the lawmaker and the constituent. The constituent has enormous potential influence over the lawmaker. And the other thing, just that last bullet, around these issues that are important to you, whether it's STEM or after-school programs or whatever your interest is, if you don't take action, chances are it doesn't get done. And that doesn't mean legislators don't do anything. Well, I was on the receiving end of this for 24 years. There was always somebody telling me what I ought to do. There was always a long list of people telling us how we ought to use the state money. There was always a long list of people telling us what the priorities ought to be around legislation. And sometimes those priorities were not necessarily in your best interest. So that if you don't do it, who's going to do it is an important question to consider. And chances are it doesn't get done as you would like to see it get done anyway. Framework for public policy advocacy, understand the relevancy. Again, why care? Understand this K-12 governance around education. Who gets to make the policy? Is it a federal issue? Is it a state issue? Is it a local issue? One of the things that I've always found really fascinating, interesting about education policy, it is the place where federal, state, and local stuff comes together. And it's very dynamic too. I mean, I'm not going to get into this discussion about what's going on at the federal level now, and some of it I consider to be quite crazy, but it may change the balance. It may change the dynamics of this federal, state, and local decision making. But understanding the governance is important. And then, as we've discussed, understand the potential of effective public policy, understand how an idea becomes a state law, and then understand the potential of effective advocacy and how you can advocate effectively. And we'll talk a bit about that. Start with knowing the issues. And you don't have to be an absolute expert, but be knowledgeable about the issue. Know what you're asking for. And why? Understand, what is the problem? And the reality, there's a saying in state capitals, and I think in Washington too, sometimes there's a great idea in search of a problem. Chances are it's not going to happen. It's a good idea, but why is it being proposed? Now, sometimes it's a good idea and it's not a problem solver. So I don't mean to exclude that as a possibility, but understand what you're proposing, understand who's effective, what might be the cost, understand who favors the legislation, potential allies. Sometimes, this is the stuff that is done by the state associations or national associations, and they feed you some of these answers, but have an understanding of this stuff as you begin a conversation with your lawmaker. And it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will get it for you. Understand, who favors the legislation and potential allies. Quick story, a couple stories. Sometimes the allies come from unusual places. I did some work around playground safety when I was in the legislature. The most effective allies around the effort to enact playground safety legislation were emergency room nurses. emergency room nurses who saw the effects of kids coming down a sliding board onto concrete, smacking their head open. There's a lot of stuff going on around early education in Harrisburg for the last several years, and it continues. A couple of the unusual allies, retired Army generals and Navy admirals who live in Pennsylvania, who see it as a national security issue. They make the case that we need to do a better job of investing in early education so kids do better in school, so we have more high school graduates who are ready to enter the military, because we have a shortage of folks who are physically ready, mentally ready in terms of education, accomplishment, and who can pass a drug test, frankly. So those military retirees, important allies. Other allies are police chiefs around early education, arguing that it would be a lot smarter to spend money on early education up front now, rather than having to spend even more with incarceration, etc. So sometimes the potential allies come from unusual places. Understand who opposes the legislation, and have an elevator speech. Whatever the issue, especially when you're going to go to the Capitol, but it might apply to at home too. But in the Capitol, and again, the Pennsylvania Capitol is only 5 or 6 stories high, but you might run into the governor on the elevator, or your legislator on the elevator, or your legislator back home in the grocery store. What's the elevator speech? Something that's going to resonate with them, something that's going to be brief, but will resonate, and they will remember you, and most importantly, they will remember your message. The elevator speech. Remember who the education policymakers are, and it's a long list of folks here. I won't read the list, but I will emphasize staff people, whether it's staff people in the district office, or staff people in Harrisburg, or staff people in Washington, maybe the staff person at your school board. My daughter-in-law once had a position where she was the first person visitors to the school district came to and would meet. Understand the influence of those staff people. In Harrisburg, that last bullet, Pennsylvania is different than some other states. It's not unique, but it's different than many other states where there is bipartisan staff working on issues. In Pennsylvania, the House and Senate have separate staff, and the Republicans and the Democrats in the House and Senate have separate staff. So when you talk about the Education Committee, the committees, Senate Ed Committee, House Ed Committee, you have 4 different staff groups that you're dealing with. Republican and Democrats in the House, Republican and Democrats in the Senate. So it's important to get to understand that, and again, where appropriate, make friends with them. Understand all the policy levers that are available, everything from the Constitution, which doesn't change easily, but it can be changed. Statutes, which are done by the legislature or the Congress. Regulations that are done by, in our case, the State Board of Education, but other state agencies, or at the federal level by the various departments and some other regulatory agencies. The department BECS, some of you who have been around this business will recognize that as basic education circulars and guidelines. They give advice. It's always smart to pay attention to the advice being given, the guidance being given by the folks who are charged with enforcement and who provide opportunities for help. And who often are dispensing the money. Appropriations are always very important, policy lever, very important, but the conditions that get attached to the money are just as important. You know, here's $1 million and you must use it for after-school programming. Here's $1 million and you may not use it for after-school programming. You know, we're getting a lot of this stuff out of the feds now, and you know, again, I don't want to get sidetracked into the federal issue, but all this stuff that's coming out of Washington telling states and school districts that you can't have DEI programs. They're trying to attach that condition to the federal money that is flowing to states and school districts. Whether they get away with it, whether that's constitutional or not, remains to be determined. The appointing authority, most of the stuff I've done for the last 50 years, I had a chance to do it because somebody appointed me. Leaders in the legislature appointed me to the Education Committee in January of 1975, 50 years ago. I wouldn't be doing this stuff probably if I were not appointed to the Education Committee then. I was eventually appointed to be chair. I was a trustee at Pitt. I was a trustee at a community college. I was on the FIA board, all because somebody appointed me. So the people with appointing authority are important as well. That ability to appoint is an important lever. The bully pulpit, that's an informal lever, but it's an important one. I don't have a lot of patience with lawmakers who, tell their constituents, I can't do anything. They're sitting there twisting their thumbs saying, blaming it on somebody else. I can't do it. Everybody can do something. Yes, there are degrees of influence, but everybody can stand up and say something. Everybody can introduce a bill. Everybody can convene. Now, it's important. The caveat is you can give a speech and nobody listens, or you can convene and nobody comes. And so lawmakers who are going to use that bully pulpit to speak or to convene need to earn that respect if they're going to be effective at it. And then elections and political campaigns, that's outside of the formal process. But I'll tell you a story about somebody that became very active in my elections over time. That was an entry point for us to build a relationship that certainly had impact in terms of policy making as well. So I'll come back to that, but don't dismiss elections and political campaigns. And very importantly, I've always looked at campaigns, and I've helped some other people. I look at elections and political campaigns as an opportunity to shape the discourse about an issue. So I've been talking to some people who call me up and ask about their school board races this year. And that election is coming up in just about 4 weeks. The fact that they're running for office is an opportunity to shape the conversation in the community about what are the important issues. And I believe that candidates have an obligation not only to listen and in some ways to reflect what they're hearing, but to also lead, to make things happen, to lead the conversation, maybe to take people where they don't necessarily want to go in terms of conversation, in terms of issues. So elections and political campaigns are an important lever. Just a reminder about some of the key events this year. This process began in terms of budget making really last summer, but it was formalized with the governor's budget message in February. The appropriation hearings, they're public hearings. That happened back in March, happens every year in March. Just a reminder, they're public hearings, but that doesn't mean everybody in the public gets to testify. Those legislative appropriation hearings are by invitation. And again, the constitutional deadline for the budget making. And as I said, stuff tends to come together in a big deal. So this is a really important time of the year if you're advocating for anything that has to do with budget, but also for stuff that has to do with maybe other elements of the school code. Chances are, if there are going to be changes enacted in 2025 to the school code, they're going to happen in these next few weeks. After that process is really starting over for 2026. The policymaking context, people ask, is the state's situation healthy or challenging? Depends who you talk to. Some folks will argue that this is a ripe opportunity to spend more money on important initiatives or to add to because there's money available. Now, a lot of that money is drying up. It's been federal money. Some of it was related to COVID. But because some of it is drying up, other lawmakers will say, well, it's not so healthy. It's a challenging time. My own legislator, my own House member, votes against budgets and is already explaining why she's going to vote against this year's budget because she doesn't want to have to increase our taxes next year. So it depends who you speak with. But the budget remains the most important policy tool. Again, this is a strong executive state. So even Governor Rendell, back a few years ago when he was confronted by a Republican legislature, he had tremendous influence in negotiating with the legislature. And that's true whether it's Republican or Democratic governor. Something is relatively new, the turnover of education chairs in the House and Senate. You can look at it two ways. It's challenging because there's no continuity, including with staff. It's a bunch of revolving chairs. Every 2 years or every 4 years, it's a new cast of characters. On the other hand, it's a new opportunity to influence people who are new on the job. So it depends how you want to look at it. But we've had a lot of turnover of education chairs in the House and Senate, Republican and Democrat. I was chair for 12 years. The last person I hired in 1998 was the executive director of the Democratic House Education Committee for the next 24 years. But he retired. And so there's been increasing churning among Republicans and Democrats, especially among Republicans in the House and Senate, though. The divisions are deeper now than I've ever experienced. To some degree on the basis of politics, but an awful lot on just ideology. I used to be able to speak with certainty that people on the House Education Committee were for traditional public education. Yeah, needed to make some changes and all, but they were for traditional public education. 25, 26 years ago, the House Ed Committee put out a report that unanimously, Republican and Democrat, unanimously said vouchers for private schools were a bad idea, that they were unconstitutional. Couldn't get anything like that consensus today. One of the criticisms I will offer is that a lot of individuals have vision for education and kids in Pennsylvania. We don't have in law, as a matter of policy, a vision for where we want to get to with public education or education generally, or with kids in Pennsylvania. We can do a lot better with that. And again, often policy is not driven by good information and data. It's driven by lawmakers who are 65 years old and remember how it used to be when we were kids. Or they remember what a neighbor told them. You know, some neighbor who had a gripe about the local school district, or a teacher, or somebody who said teachers are overpaid, and so the lawmaker thinks teachers are overpaid. I had a legislator, my own legislator, a different legislator, 10 years ago, who was very outspoken about teachers in our school district making more than $100,000 a year. That was just factually incorrect. But he was telling that story all over the community and all over Harrisburg. So the information is important, the data is important, and what you will offer, including your own stories, will be really important. Those last two items in red, those are my gripes about where we are. I think we've got a couple of major problems. Gerrymandering at the federal level and at the state level has led to a situation where there are fewer and fewer lawmakers in the middle. I can get some 12-year-old kid with the right software who will create a legislative map for our 203 Pennsylvania House districts where 90% of them are safe because they are so Republican or so Democrat. And so increasingly at the federal level and at the state level, we hear lawmakers appealing to their base and ignoring the middle or ignoring folks on the other side. I don't think that's been a good idea. And the effects of campaign finances, this is not buying somebody's votes, but this is about influencing the outcome of elections. The fact that at the federal level, well, we've all read about Elon Musk spent $250 million, one person. Other prominent billionaires spent tens of millions of dollars. In Harrisburg, we've got individuals who are spending millions of dollars to support a single issue. I don't want to personalize this, but old story, 50 years ago, 1974, I was a Democrat. I defeated a Republican incumbent in a Republican district and spent $2,000. Today, that's $250,000 race. So the effects of campaign money has had outcomes. So most of you probably belong to one or more of these organizations. These are the folks who influence. You want to know who your legislator is? Ultimately, you need to start where they are, not where you wish they would be. Sometimes your lawmaker is less sensitive to education or even kids. They may not tell you that, but they're less sensitive, but they're big on economic development or they're big on jobs. Sometimes you have to articulate the education issue in terms of impact on economy or impact on jobs or impact on whatever they think is important. But you want to get to know who these lawmakers are. You want to get into their head. People who worked with me around that playground safety issue knew that my first son had a terrible head injury from a schoolyard accident. Other people worked with me around some early ed issues because they knew my wife was working in an early child care center. Her first job was a Head Start teacher. They knew that about me, and they figured I'd be sensitive to that. So you want to know who this lawmaker is and a little bit about their family and what's going to resonate with them. That's the key, because you're going to have to start where they are. Ultimately, you want to build this trusting relationship between you and your policymaker. I'll tell the story that I alluded to earlier. It was one of my first campaigns. I was campaigning in Wilkinsburg in Allegheny County at a farmer's market during the summer. I was probably 27, 28 years old. I met this other young guy who was in his early 30s. He was the executive director of what we called Allegheny East MHMR agency. And it was the MHMR service provider for our part of Allegheny County. It was a not-for-profit. We exchanged propaganda, mine telling him why I was a good guy, his telling me why MHMR issues were important. His name was Ray Webb. Ray helped me in my campaign. Over several subsequent campaigns, he and his wife held coffee clutches for me at their home, put up yard signs for me, got their neighbors to put up yard signs. After I first got elected, Ray asked me to come on to the board of directors of Allegheny East. Anything to this day that I think I know about MHMR issues was rooted in that invitation to serve on that board, where I, again, understanding confidentiality issues, I got to know staff, got to know even clients and their families. When I was on the Appropriations Committee and I was asking questions of the Secretary of Welfare, I would call up Ray. I would call up Ray Webb and say, what questions should I be asking? When we had a budget proposal, I would call up Ray and ask him, because he became a statewide leader around MHMR issues. I would call him up and ask him, what do you think of the governor's budget? Is this enough? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Does it just look good, sound good, but not really being good? I had that trusting relationship with him. Later on, he was very active with social workers in the state. was Social Worker of the Year at one point. He called me up and asked if I would introduce legislation to license social workers in Pennsylvania. We didn't have a big debate about it. I said, yes, I will. I said, I'll lead the legislative side, you lead the advocacy side. It took a couple of years, but we got enacted for the first time legislation, a law, to license social workers in Pennsylvania. You want to identify and nurture champions. They hopefully include your own legislators, but maybe not. Maybe your legislator has other priorities, serves on other committees, and you have to go find some other champions too. That's not to ignore your own lawmaker, but the cause, the advocacy cause, may need to identify some other champions. I'm sure I've asked Contrail over the years, who are the champions around STEM issues? Who are the champions around after school issues? And that depends. You all may have different views about that, but you need to find champions who will carry the day for you. But again, going back to the Ray story, the Ray Webb story, establish your credibility. Never lie, never mislead. Ray never gave me a number. He never gave me a question that would embarrass me if I asked it or if I presented it. I trusted him, and his stuff was always good, always reliable. Get to know the staff in the legislative offices. Build a team of constituents. If you're approaching your school board or approaching your lawmaker, maybe the team will vary place to place, but it might include parents and teachers and maybe business folks. Get them onto your turf. Some of the most effective lobbying or advocacy work. It's one thing to talk about your school when you're sitting in Harrisburg or even in their legislative office. Get them into your school building. Get them into your program building. Get them to meet your kids, your students, your parents. Get them onto your turf. That can be so powerful. I was part of another program just a couple of weeks ago, and somebody told the story about how a lawmaker, this is at the federal level, a member of Congress who was totally ignoring everything they were trying to pitch about a particular issue, had a complete turnaround when they got him into his school building. Was meeting it became a priority for him after he got onto their turf. Again, allies, coalitions, networks, the media opportunities. Petitions are okay. People always ask me, what's most effective? Well, the most effective thing is building this trusting relationship. But some people do petitions. Keep in mind, there are folks like I used to be. I'd get a petition with 1,000 names on it, and I would sometimes pick a couple names, and I would call them up and say, you asked me to vote for House Bill 1, why? They didn't have an idea. They had no idea that, I got a story that, well, everybody was signing it when we were leaving church, or everybody was signing it at the supermarket or at the senior citizen center, but I'm not sure what it is. If you're going to put your name on a petition, have an idea of what it is, because you might get a call like that. Understand, again, a little bit of this is redundant, but understand, what is the problem? What issue are you trying to fix? Why is it a problem? What's the effects of it? Who cares? Who are the stakeholders? Who actually cares? And know what your ask is. This is even more effective than the elevator speech. Know what you're asking. I used to entertain, as visitors, sometimes hundreds of people a day. They would come in sometimes in large groups, sometimes as individuals. I was pretty good at handling conversation. People usually left my office feeling pretty good, feeling happy. Some of you have heard me describe those kumbaya moments. They didn't ask me to do anything. That's a mistake. It can be complicated, it can be simple. It can be as simple as asking for a follow-up call, or a speech, or a visit to your school, or a vote on a piece of legislation, or a letter of support, but ask them to do something for which you will hold them accountable. Let them know you're asking something for which you expect them to be accountable. You want them looking over their shoulder, knowing that you're watching, that you have expectations. So the ask, who should do what? Be specific. Ideally, it's measurable because that's the way to hold them accountable. The why is, the why. Do you have a compelling argument? Again, does anybody really care about this? That elevator speech. Questions to consider, because lawmakers will ask this. The purpose, why bother? Again, I'm not going to read it. A lot of that stuff we covered already. When you're doing these visits, what do you want to accomplish? Are you building on a relationship that's already there? Or are you introducing yourself for the first time? You're introducing your organization, introducing your cause. What's your ask? What are you going to leave behind? Doesn't have to be very complicated. You want to, if you have a business card, of course, leave a business card, maybe a one-pager. I mean, you want to leave a book, fine. They're not going to read the book. In most cases, they're not going to read the book. Maybe a staff person will read the book. Maybe it's a thick report. Somebody might read it. But that 1 or 2 pager is really important, really effective. And understand what the next steps are going to be. This is not a one-time activity. Again, the office visits, be ready to tell a story. Again, I remember in 1994, a hearing that we had at Reading Community College, and a young man testified, and I always tell this same story. He waved a piece of paper at us. It was an education committee hearing. Waved a piece of paper at us and said, "This is what you did to me." It was his diploma. He was 21 years old. He said, "I can't read, I can't write. I'm never going to get a good job, and you gave me this piece of paper thinking you were doing me a favor." I mean, that's been one of the key questions. What's the value of that piece of paper in every school district? Do we do kids a favor by giving it to them when they're not ready? You want to stay on message, because these meetings will usually be pretty short. Sometimes you might have to drag the lawmaker back, but get them to stay on message politely. Again, not a one-time activity. Want to find out how you can build a relationship. All these things that are identified here are potential ways, but you want to become the turn-to person on your issue. You want to become the Ray Webb for your lawmaker. So your lawmaker calls you up on these issues and asks, "What do you think? What should I do?" You want to be nurturing champions, and always you want to remember to say thanks. So when you have this, these will be hot links. We don't have the time to go to them now, but there's a tremendous amount of information on the General Assembly's website. 10 years ago, it was one of the worst in the country. Now it's probably one of the best. You can track your lawmaker. You can track a piece of legislation. So it's an important tool for you. Again, this is just information for you, but you can track a bill. Just remember the bill number remains the same for the entire session, no matter how many times it gets amended. Things that do get changed is the printer's number. It gets changed every time the bill is amended and reprinted. There's a new printer's number then. And remember, just by taking out the word "not" or adding the word "not," you can flip the effect of a piece of legislation 180 degrees. So you want to make sure you're dealing with the most current printer's number when you're advocating or opposing. Some communication tools, just a reminder. The Pennsylvania Bulletin is the official newspaper of the Commonwealth. I always tell folks, if you have no life at all, you will read this page front to end every week. But most people have other things to do. But it's published every Saturday. It's free online. You can have a paid paper subscription. but I think I can click on here real quickly because we're running out of time. Maybe that's not going to be a hot link right now. No, there it is. Something's happening. That's that's the front page. So I would scan this and I would be looking for Department of Education on there. That would cause me to go inside and look at a little bit more detail, like here, the contents. And, you know, there's an availability of funds, Department of Education. Might be your funding for STEM or after school or whatever. So anyway, let me just get out of that. However I do that now. I want to make sure I don't have everybody disappear. Yeah, okay. And just final, I think this is the final slide, yeah. Final slide. The House and Senate Journal, it's similar to the Federal Congressional Record. It reflects every word that is uttered on the floor of the House or Senate. So if you're doing research, historical research, you can go back and find out what I said on some given date in 1983 if you want to. So important. And I'm easy to find. Happy to do any follow-up with this. I know that this was scheduled to end at 11. Some of you may have made other commitments, but I checked with Cowell earlier. For those who want to stay around, those who have questions, I am going to hang around here. I'm going to stop sharing and respond to any questions that you have. Cowell, we still good?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So anyone still on has a question, you can please unmute yourself and ask that question or drop that question in the chat box. Again, understanding if some of you have a commitment at 11 and need to go, but we want to leave a little bit of room for any Q&A.
And if you're like I am, you usually think of the question after the program has ended and you're driving down the road and you think, I wish I would have asked. So you have or will have my contact information. I'm easy to find. My phone is attached to my body. So I respond to text messages almost immediately and emails usually within a day. So don't hesitate to reach out.
I'll also note here in this pause here as you gather in your thought or question, expanding on Ron's communication tools. You'll see right now in the chat box, I dropped the After School Professionals Appreciation Week link that will take you to some press kits that are available to reach out to your legislator. So following those instructions by locating your legislator here in PA, and then using some of those available resources to reach out and send some messages to the legislator. Can't expand enough or support enough taking time to build the relationship with your local legislator. It may not happen on your first email or the first couple of months on your outreach, but continue to kind of chip away at that rock until it does split and you have some response. Because the impact of what you're doing is really important and needs to be highlighted over and over again. Also going to drop in the chat right now the link to registering for After School Advocacy Day. That is June 4th. It is approaching pretty fast here. So if you haven't registered, please take a moment today and register for that event. We will schedule your meeting with your legislator, provide you some resources, tools, and a packet as far as the leave behind for the legislator. So we'll have everything ready for you. We just need your body and your voice on that day. So please try to make it out and participate. Last but not least, I'm going to drop in the chat just a link to the PSAYDN Digest where you'll find information that I shared here today about the After School Appreciation Week. our registration to the Action Day and other professional development opportunities that we have available for you all. So if there are no questions from the remaining participants, I'm going to turn it over to Aisha for the closeout. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Ron.
That concludes our session for today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'd like to thank Ron for taking the time to share this important information about how to advocate for after-school programs. If you look in the chat, you'll find a link to the evaluation for today's session. So take a moment to fill that out, and thank you for joining us, and have an amazing weekend.
Take care, everybody.